Now let's make welcome our favorite singer around the community jamboree as she sings the Lovesick Blues, Miss Patsy Cline.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I will take you into a story that begins with stardom and ends in silence. A story of a voice so powerful it could move a nation to tears, and yet behind that voice was a heart burdened by fear, visions, and an unshakable sense of something coming, something final. She was one of country music's brightest stars, a woman who had defied the odds in a male-dominated world and left behind melodies that still echo through jukeboxes, radios, and the souls of millions. But in her final days, she told her closest friends things that would send chills down the spine of anyone who heard them. She had a strange feeling, she said, a sense that death was near. She updated her will. She gave away personal items, and before she boarded that plane, she told her mother, "If I go now, I go knowing I've done everything I could." Then the sky opened, and everything changed. Tonight, dear audience, we revisit the eerie final days of Patsy Cline, not just to mourn her loss, but to uncover the haunting truth she may have carried to her grave. Did Patsy know she was going to die? Ladies and gentlemen, before the tragedy, before the storm, there was her voice. Patsy Cline wasn't just a country singer. She was a force, raw, unapologetic, magnetic. Born Virginia Patterson Hensley in Winchester, Virginia, 1932, she grew up poor in a home shadowed by instability. Her father abandoned her family when she was still a child. By all accounts, her early life was filled with more struggle than promise. But even then, her voice, that voice, was undeniable. She sang in local clubs, on local radio stations. No formal training, no powerful mentors, just pure talent and a fire in her that wouldn't die. By the early 1950s, she was pushing her way onto the stage, literally and figuratively, in an industry that didn't take kindly to women who demanded more than applause. And then it happened. In 1957, she released Walkin' After Midnight. The performance on Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a moment. America sat up, took notice. The radio waves bent to her will. Her voice was smoky and strong, soft and aching. It was as if every note she sang carried the bruises of her life. By the early 1960s, she had become the first female country artist to headline her own shows, to cross over to the pop charts, to wear rhinestones like armor and stand toe-to-toe with men in a world that told her to smile and step aside. Her songs, I Fall to Pieces, Crazy, She's Got You, they weren't just hits. They were stories, confessions, laments of a woman who knew heartbreak like a familiar room. Crazy, penned by a then unknown Willie Nelson, became her signature. But the soul she poured into it was hers alone, and audiences knew it. They felt it. Behind the scenes, she was fiery, quick to curse, fiercely protective of the musicians around her. Loretta Lynn, then just a wide-eyed newcomer, would later say, "Patsy was my big sister. She made sure no man messed with me." In a time when women were often treated as ornaments in country music, Patsy carried herself like a queen, but not one of privilege, one of battle scars. She was also a wife, a mother, a woman constantly torn between the demands of stardom and the duties of home. Her marriage to Charlie Dick was passionate, explosive. They loved hard, fought harder, and yet through it all, she sang. America adored her, and why not? She was beautiful, brash, and heartbreakingly real. She wore her pain like a badge, never softening the edges to please anyone. To the public, she was a star. But to those who truly listened, who really listened, there was always something in her voice, something haunted. Everyone thought she was on top of the world, that she had finally found peace, that this woman who had clawed her way to the spotlight was now basking in its warmth. But, dear audience, the light was beginning to flicker. And behind that radiant smile, behind the glamour and the headlines, Patsy Cline was beginning to sense something the rest of the world didn't.
Ladies and gentlemen, beneath every great voice is a story that longs to be heard, not just through song, but through silence, through suffering, through secrets left unspoken. To the world, Patsy Cline was a phoenix, bold, indestructible, forever rising. But inside the walls of her home, the fire burned differently. Her marriage to Charlie Dick was as famous as her music, though not for the reasons fans would have wished. When they first met, Charlie was a linotype operator, handsome, charming, full of swagger. He was instantly captivated by her presence. Patsy, always drawn to intense personalities, fell hard. They married in 1957. But from the beginning, their relationship was stormy. Friends recall the fights, loud, fierce, sometimes physical. Patsy once threw a lamp across the room. Charlie, by his own admission, drank too much, got jealous too easily, and didn't understand the spotlight she was walking into. He wanted the woman he married, not the icon the world was beginning to worship. Patsy, meanwhile, was juggling it all: career, children, public expectation. She had given birth to 2 children, Julie and Randy, and loved them fiercely. But the road never waited. One tour ended and another began. She missed birthdays, holidays, first steps, and each time she kissed them goodbye, it cut deeper. She began to speak to friends about the pull between her identity as a mother and the demands of her career. She loves singing, she once said, but sometimes I just want to be home with my babies. And then there were the whispers. Rumors that Charlie wasn't faithful, that the jealousy had curdled into something darker, that the arguments weren't just about schedules and late nights, but about control, about Patsy's growing power. One friend remembered her saying, "He wants me to stop, but he also wants the money. He doesn't want me to be bigger than him." Still, she stayed, part out of loyalty, part because divorce wasn't easy, not then, not in the South, not for a public figure, and perhaps part because she believed in fighting for what she loved, even when it hurt. Meanwhile, the industry wasn't always kind. She was a woman in rhinestones, commanding the stage like a general. She didn't soften her voice, didn't fake smiles. Producers called her difficult. Men in suits called her bossy. She called herself real. Patsy began to suffer from intense migraines. Her health wavered. In 1961, she was involved in a near-fatal car accident that threw her through the windshield. She was in critical condition for days. Her forehead was permanently scarred, a scar she wore makeup over, but war like a reminder. After the crash, something in her shifted. She started talking more openly about death, about premonitions. She began giving away belongings, updating her will, telling friends she might not have long. It was brushed off at the time. Just the trauma talking, they said. She'll be fine. But Patsy knew. Or at least she believed. And belief, dear audience, can be more chilling than fact. She once told a friend, "I've had 2 near-death experiences already. The 3rd time, I won't make it." And then, as if fate were listening, the final act of her life began to take shape, quietly, relentlessly, just beyond the curtain.
Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that the final week of Patsy Cline's life played out like a script written by destiny itself, foreboding, symbolic, and filled with chilling signs that something irreversible was coming? It began with a benefit concert. March 3, 1963, Kansas City, Kansas, a fundraiser for the family of a DJ who had recently died in a car crash. Despite battling a fierce case of the flu, Patsy insisted on performing. Her voice, though strained, still carried its signature ache and authority. The crowd roared. They didn't know they were witnessing her final performance. After the show, weather conditions in the Midwest worsened. Heavy fog blanketed the region. Her friend and fellow artist Dottie West begged her to drive back to Nashville instead of flying. "Stay one more night, Patsy," Dottie pleaded. "It's too dangerous." But Patsy declined. "Don't worry about me," she said, with a tired smile. "If it's my time to go, it's my time." Those words, spoken casually, would echo through country music history like a ghost in the rafters. On March 5, 1963, Patsy boarded a small Piper PA-24 Comanche with fellow Grand Ole Opry performers Cowboy Copas and Hawkshaw Hawkins. Her pilot was Randy Hughes, Copas's son-in-law and Patsy's manager. He was not a trained commercial pilot. The aircraft was small, the visibility poor, and the decision was rushed. At 6:20 p.m., the plane took off from Dyersburg, Tennessee, heading southeast. It never reached its destination. Somewhere near Camden, Tennessee, the plane crashed nose first into a wooded area. No one survived. The wreckage wasn't discovered until the next morning. The scene was unspeakable. News spread quickly. The country music world stood still. DJs cried on air. Fans gathered outside her home in Virginia. Loretta Lynn, who considered Patsy her mentor, broke down publicly, saying, "She wasn't just my friend, she was my heart." Charlie Dick was inconsolable. Friends later revealed he was tormented by guilt. He had urged her to keep pushing, to keep performing, even when she wanted rest. He drank heavily, spoke little. Their 2 children, just 4 and 2 years old, had lost their mother without understanding why. And then stories began to emerge, frighteningly detailed stories. Patsy had cleaned out her closet before the trip. She had written her will again. Days before, she had reportedly told a fellow musician, "Honey, I'm not gonna be around much longer." When asked why, she just nodded and said, "I can feel it." It wasn't just coincidence, it was premonition. In the weeks that followed, the press turned reflective. Radio hosts played her songs back to back. Some stations even ran Crazy on loop for hours. That voice, so full of yearning, now took on a haunting new weight. I fall to pieces each time I see you again. Behind the scenes, the country music industry scrambled. They had lost one of their leading lights, and no one knew how to move forward. The women who had looked up to her, Brenda Lee, Loretta Lynn, Jan Howard, were left without a guiding star. And as for Charlie Dick, he faded into grief. He kept her memory alive by maintaining her estate, giving interviews, attending tribute concerts, but he never remarried, never truly healed. Ladies and gentlemen, when Patsy Cline died, something deeper was lost. Not just a voice, not just a legend, but a sense of invincibility. If she could fall from the sky, so could anyone. Ladies and gentlemen, in the wake of unspeakable loss, the question remains, what endures?
For Patsy Cline, it was never just about fame. It was never about rhinestones, record sales, or marquee lights. It was about truth, raw, unsanitized truth, sung through every syllable of her voice. And that truth did not die in the woods of Tennessee. In the months following her death, something extraordinary began to happen. Her records, instead of fading, soared. Posthumous re-releases of Sweet Dreams and Faded Love climbed the charts. A generation too young to have known her while she lived now mourned her as if they had. But more than charts, more than numbers, it was her influence, quiet but unstoppable, that began to root itself deep into the soil of American music. Loretta Lynn often said Patsy still spoke to her in dreams. She taught me to stand tall, to speak up, Loretta would recall, eyes welling. She told me I didn't have to take crap from nobody, not no man, not no label. And Charlie Dick, despite his flaws, his demons, dedicated his life to preserving Patsy's legacy. He turned their modest Nashville home into a place of remembrance. He collaborated with producers to remaster her tapes, worked with authors on biographies, even helped with the creation of the 1985 film Sweet Dreams, starring Jessica Lange. Years later, when asked why he had never moved on, Charlie simply said, "She's not gone. Not to me. She's just not here right now." And then, in 1973, just 10 years after her death, Patsy Cline made history once more. She became the first solo female artist inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. There was no acceptance speech, no spotlight on her face, only a recording of her voice, playing softly in the auditorium as the audience stood in solemn silence. Some said it was her final standing ovation, but those who knew better knew it wasn't the last. Today, her music still plays at weddings, in heartbreak playlists, in quiet kitchens late at night. And sometimes, when the world gets too loud, we return to her voice, to that ache, that soul, that truth. Because, dear audience, though Patsy's plane fell from the sky, her spirit never hit the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, what do we make of a life like Patsy Cline's? A woman who rose from poverty to stardom, who defied the odds and shattered the limits placed upon her gender, her voice, her presence. A mother who kissed her babies goodbye, not knowing if she'd return. An artist who sang with such haunting clarity as if every note were borrowed time.
Was it fate that took her? Or was it the price of greatness, the constant chase, the lonely hotels that stage lights never dim? What haunts us most, perhaps, are not just the songs she left behind, but the things she didn't get to say, the stages she didn't get to conquer, the albums never recorded, the children who had to grow up with a mother's voice, but not her arms. And yet, her story remains. Because Patsy Cline did more than sing, she told us who she was. She gave us her pain, her defiance, her fear, and her fire. And in doing so, she became immortal. So, dear audience, I ask you, how does one measure a legacy? In awards? In record sales? Or in the way a voice still cracks your soul open decades after it's gone? Is it possible that Patsy knew her time was short and chose to burn brighter because of it? Or are we simply trying to find meaning in a tragedy too senseless to bear? Ladies and gentlemen, behind the glamour, behind the glitter, lies a story no spotlight could ever touch. A story of love, pain, and the silence that followed a song cut too short. Perhaps the greatest voices are the ones that never truly leave us. Thank you for listening.